So there comes a point in everybody's life where you've got to grow up and stop using plastic storage bins as furniture. I guess today's that day for me. Let's see if we can't come up with something a little bit more unique. So I started with the base first on this build, and I glued up a bunch of Brazilian cherry or Jatoba offcuts that I had, and planed them down to about 1.5 inches thick. And then I cut this taper using a couple different methods. I used the bandsaw for most of the work, and then kind of squared it off where I needed really square on these smaller pieces where I couldn't get the hand plane in there completely flat, but I knew there was going to be a mortise and tin in there. But I did most of the work smoothing everything with a smoothing plane and then a block plane to kind of chamfer the edges. And then this is just cutting the stretcher piece and cutting some angles where everything will come together. And you can see right here, it's basically just a triangle with the extra where the leg is going to be dominoed into the stretcher hanging out. So I switched over to the dado blade and kind of carved out half of this for a little half lap. And it's a kind of complicated joint. It's much easier to look at and make sense of than try to explain to words. I have no idea what you would even call this, but right here you can see kind of how the whole thing came together. And then here, like I said, I used dominoes to join this together. I actually didn't get a shot of me joining the stretchers, but here is a leg and a stretcher attached, and I ended up making 2 tables, so in total I had 6 of these identical pieces. And that's what's kind of cool about it, is that they're all the exact same thing, and then you just have to spend a good chunk of an afternoon trying to figure out how you're going to get them glued and clamped together. But as you can see, as I lay it down there, I finally got it figured out. Now moving over to the case, like a lot of my furniture work, especially anything with kind of a modern look, I like to do mitered edges if possible. There I was ripping some cherry plywood for the case, and then here is some shop-made edge banding. Don't like the store-bought stuff at all, so I cut this about 1 inch thick, 3/4 of an inch wide, and then used some clamps to hold that on. I cut it a little proud and then came back and trimmed it up with a router, and here kind of sanding everything, making sure it's flush. And there's cutting the miters on the edges, and there's the side pieces. I started to use dominoes, but it really just overcomplicated everything, so I just ran glue down the edges of all the miters and then just used the trusty blue tape to secure everything together. And using a band clamp to kind of cinch it all up. It would have been nice to have another one, but go with what you got. And then here I used just some panhead screws. I countersunk some holes on the bottom and just attached the bases in. Now moving on to the drawers, I had some softwood lying around. I think this is box elder. I don't know. I guess that's technically a hardwood, but wasn't anything I would really use for the front, so I figured I could make these drawer boxes out of that without having to go buy anything new. And I thought about a couple different types of joinery, but I was going to put metal drawer slides on this, and I thought the joinery on the side of the drawers wasn't going to be too high end. So what I did was just put a couple screws in, and then you'll see I come back and fill that in with 3/4 inch dowels. And then on the bottom, I just used a piece of 1/4 inch plywood and nailed that on to give it a little extra space in the drawer. And here kind of using a strip of plywood, as you can see, under the slide to make sure that is the same height on both sides. Takes a little finagling, but you get a good set of slides, and so make sure they're spaced out at the bottom evenly. And I think I used a couple pieces of 1/4-inch plywood for that, and then you're good to go on clearance. Here I am with my shop assistant kind of putting those plugs in. She's hammering those in, and I came back and cut them off. Now on to the drawer fronts. I squared up a good chunky piece of the same Brazilian cherry and then kind of just cut it to fit. These tables were originally designed to be identical, but I think one might be 1/8 of an inch shorter or something like that. So I did actually do this process, completely unique for each of the tables. And again, it took quite a bit of finagling, but I used some hot glue on the back of the drawer once I felt like I had it, and then I could use that clamp to hold it and come in and put some screws from the backside. And here is an idea I had never done before, but I had kind of mashed together a couple different that I had seen in some production furniture and stuff like that. Was kind of this edge pull. I couldn't find any at the big box stores around me, so I just got this piece of, I think it was 1" by 1" aluminum, cut it, ran it through the table saw, and cut it down to where it was a little bit shorter on one side, the side where the fingers would actually go up underneath the pull. And I cut that, and then you can see I put some hammered spray paint, drilled a couple holes in the top to fit down in that recess of the drawer front, and then I came back here and countersunk those where everything will sit nice and flush and won't interfere with the top of the case. And there it is, kind of coming together right there. So I went ahead and put those back on, screwed those back on the drawer fronts, and here I am just spraying on some water-based finish. I would love to be able to use a fancier oil-based finish, but when you've got kids and a family, it's going to be used and banged on quite a bit. You go with what's easiest and what'll last longer, that you could always come back and redo. And that's about it. I think that's definitely an upgrade, and I'm really happy with how they came out. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video. If you'd like to subscribe, I put out videos every other Monday. And if you want to stay up to date with what's going on in between, you can follow me over on Instagram at MBT Handmade. Until next time, don't buy something, make something. Thanks.